Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to get started in just a minute, but in the meantime, we'll give everyone a minute or so to hop on and get settled in.
Sorry, my Chrome crashed on me.
Oh, no, you're good. We can still see and hear you. And on the bottom left side of your screen, you're able to, for our audience members, you're able to see our attendee chat. So feel free to send any questions or comments you have throughout the webinar in there, and we'll get to them. All right, since it is 10 o'clock Central on the dot, we're going to go ahead and get started. Hi, everyone. My name is Lindsay Joseph, and I'm a demand generation specialist here at OpenStax's. And today we're joined by Dr. Rachel Bzostek Walker, who is the senior contributing author of Introduction to Political Science, as well as Anthony Palmiotto, the director of higher education here at OpenStax's. And today we are going to be diving into what you need to know about OpenStax's free introductory political science textbook. Now, for today's agenda, we're going to start off with a brief introduction to OpenStax's, and some of you may not be familiar with OpenStax's and what we do. Then Anthony will discuss why we decided to publish a political science textbook. Then we'll begin our Q&A session with Dr. Bzostek Walker. Then we'll discuss how you can access the textbook for free, how you can access our free instructor and student resources, and then answer your questions. To begin, we're going to dive into some important components of OpenStax's. Some of you may not be familiar with OpenStax's, so these are the few key things you'll want to know. OpenStax's is a nonprofit, and we are a part of Rice University, which is located in Houston, Texas. As a nonprofit, we're able to sustain our efforts to make education more accessible and affordable through philanthropic support. We receive grants from foundations like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. We also receive individual donations from individual supporters, as well as mission support fees from our technology partners. As a nonprofit, we are mission-oriented, and at the end of the day, our aim is to transform learning so that education works for every single student. OpenStax's main area of work involves publishing a library of free, peer-reviewed, openly licensed textbooks. We published our first textbook in 2012, and since then have published over 57 textbooks and have saved students over $1.7 billion in textbook costs. OpenStax's has a very far-reaching influence, which we're very fortunate for. Not only are we present in more than half of all universities in the United States, but we have grown to have over 36,000 faculty adopters use our textbooks in their courses, thereby serving over 14 million students and saving them over $1.7 billion. Earlier, I mentioned that OpenStax's publishes free, openly licensed textbooks. But what exactly does openly licensed mean? OpenStax's textbooks are an example of open education resources, or OER. We have an excellent definition up here on the screen from the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation, which is a super strong supporter of OER. And in essence, open educational resources are any educational materials that are available publicly, don't cost anything to use, and lack traditional copyright restrictions. Since they're openly licensed, instructors are able to revise, edit, and redistribute the content to meet their individual course needs, allowing for customization and a lot of influence over their specific teaching needs. OpenStax's textbooks are aligned to course topics and outcomes, and each textbook is designed to meet the scope and sequence requirements of its respective course. Our textbooks are written and reviewed by experienced and expert faculty, and each of our textbooks undergoes a rigorous peer review and revision process. We revise our textbooks and we make sure to publish our textbooks in a way that ensures the material is up to date, clear to understand, and reflective of diverse audiences. We also revise our books when it's pedagogically necessary. So if there's a major development in a field, we may publish a second edition of a textbook, like we did earlier this year with our astronomy textbook. But we also make sure to make frequent updates to the online versions of our textbooks to ensure that the content is up to date and clear to understand. Instructors are even able to submit errata suggestions on our website for our subject matter experts to review. OpenStax's textbooks are published in multiple platforms and formats. Our textbooks are available for free online in WebView and PDF format. In addition, we know that some instructors may prefer a print copy of their book, or that for accessibility reasons, some students may need a print version of the textbook. So students and instructors are also able to purchase a physical copy of our textbooks at a very low cost online. As I mentioned before, our textbooks also undergo regular errata and currency updates to ensure that the content is clear to understand and that we're reflecting the needs of our instructors and students. At the end of the day, OpenStax's textbooks look a lot like other textbooks that are out there on the market. However, unlike textbooks that aren't OER, OpenStax's textbooks are 100% free to use and are 100% openly licensed and thereby customizable for your course needs. OpenStax's offers more than just free textbooks. We also offer free instructor and student resources to go alongside each of our textbooks. These include LMS course shells and cartridges, lecture slides, instructors' manuals, test banks, and more. We also offer a variety of free webinars like this one, as well as helpful articles on the OpenStax's blog about topics like tips for using our resources, the updates we've made to our books, and strategies for enhancing student learning and engagement. Our support center is an excellent resource to turn to if you have any questions about using OpenStax's. And lastly, if you're looking for educational technology to pair with your OpenStax's textbook, you can find some great technology options through OpenStax's Tech Scout. Now I'm going to pass it over to Anthony to talk about why we decided to add a free, openly licensed, peer-reviewed political science textbook to our library.
Thanks very much, Lindsay, for that great introduction. Hope everybody can hear me, and thank you all for joining. So we decided to publish this. What OpenStax's is trying to do is create educational access and support for all learners, and that means doing better in the books we publish and publishing more books. Creating more breadth. We had an American government textbook. It's an important course. It's one that maybe some of you also teach, but there's another, the other course in political science that many people take or many schools offer, sometimes as an alternative to American government or sometimes in concert with American government, is Introduction to Political Science. It obviously has a different type of textbook, a different approach in general that we'll hear more about. And I think, one of the larger issues that we're also trying to address is not just providing more textbooks to more students, but provide more material that everyone, faculty, librarians, instructional designers, other OER providers, other technology providers in the educational space, in both high school, in college, in other arenas of education, that they can draw from and pull from to create their own resources. So by having the political science textbook and American government, as well as our US history book, our college success book, our writing guide, and other courses across our arena, we hopefully provide a lot of fuel or starting places for schools, faculty, other types of institutions to recreate and remix materials to create what they need for their courses. So this was an effort to be more inclusive, provide more access, and provide more starting places for innovation that we and our generous funders support.
Thank you so much, Anthony, for sharing. It was great to learn a bit more about the background behind why we decided to add such an important textbook to our library. Now we are going to go ahead and start our Q&A session with senior contributing author, Dr. Bzostek Walker. So welcome, Dr. Bzostek Walker. It's great to have you on here today, and we are so grateful for everything you've done for OpenStax's and for students and for taking time out of your busy schedule to be on this webinar today. So it would be great if we could get started by having you introduce yourself.
Thank you for having me. So when we first started working on this project, I've had a bit of a job switch from when the project started to today. When we first started working on this project, I was a professor of political science at the Frisco campus of Collin College. And in between when we were working on the proposal for the project and when we started writing everything, I shifted to be an associate dean of academic affairs and workforce at our technical campus in Allen. So things changed a bit for me as we were going. And so I was able to do some things that I had planned and not able to do other things that I had planned as we wended our way through this, which a lot of people in academia are not at all surprised about. That happens for a lot of us. But this book was something that I think is extraordinarily important. And when we were working on putting the proposal together, one of the things that the two other senior contributing authors and I thought was really important for students was that we made it kind of a really good overview, not only of the field of political science, but that we also kind of found ways to connect the book to the whole liberal arts education that students would be exposed to in political science, because we thought that was something that students often missed, that they just saw this as a course that they were taking or that they had to take. And so that was something that we all, the three of us who were working on this, that we all really connected with.
Thank you so much for introducing yourself. And we're really, as I mentioned before, happy that you were able to hop on today. All right, our first question for you is, what does Introduction to Political Science cover? And for our audience members, up here on the screen, you're able to see our table of contents, essentially, for the textbook.
It covers the breadth of the field of political science. And so we were initially given, I think, 15 chapters to play with, and we went back and forth. And we said we need 16 chapters, and we were able to kind of negotiate that, an additional chapter. And it really, you know, when you look at what is political science, you can quibble a little bit about certain things. We kind of got stuck at the end with the bit about international law and IR and international political economy, and can you shove all of that in one chapter? And we ended up with like a 300-page chapter. We're like, no, we can't. Kind of need to split that out. But it is the entirety of political science. And we were tasked with a really big, when we were putting together the table of contents, we were tasked with a really big ask of, what do you want students to know? If you have students who take one class in political science, what do you want them to walk away with? And we realized that this book would be accessed by students who do not only live in the United States, but this will be available to students all over the world. And so it looks at things from, hopefully, not only a North American perspective, but from more of an international perspective, if you will. We tried to look at things from less of how does the United States look at the world, but more of how does the world look at the world, and how does the world look at legislatures, how does the world look at the executive branch, things like that. And we were very deliberate when we were setting it up that it's political science as the world studies political science.
Oh, thank you. I think that international approach, and throughout the text, there are so many examples of both domestic and international political science concepts. And I think that is very important for students because, as you mentioned, OpenStax's textbooks aren't only used by students in the United States, they're used by universities and students all across the globe.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's fundamentally something that's hard for a lot of us in the United States to kind of wrap our minds around. That, you know, we so often, we get stuck in our little rut that we teach American government, or we teach American foreign policy, or we teach international relations, often from an American perspective. But the great thing with OER is that you could have a student who's taking a class, you know, halfway around the world, or who's just interested in, you know, these ideas, who has an internet connection, and they can download this book and they can read about it. And so we wanted to make sure that it was accessible and understandable to anyone, and that anyone around the world could look at it and not only see things from an American perspective, but could see things from a true international perspective.
No, thank you so much for diving a bit deeper into that. I know that for me personally, it's very interesting to learn about your writing process and how you determined the content to include and the examples to include. So I know that I really appreciated that information. And we actually have a question from one of our audience members about the scope and the chapters included in Introduction to Political Science. So this question is, why didn't you combine chapters 4, civil liberties, and 7, civil rights?
The decision to not combine civil liberties and civil rights is because fundamentally they're different. That civil liberties and civil rights are different ideas. This mirrors what happens in a lot of the American government textbooks, where civil liberties and civil rights are covered separately. And so this was that same general idea, and that civil liberties are something. And so if you look at it, that civil liberties are under the idea or under the rubric of individuals, and civil rights are under the rubric of groups. And that civil liberties are something that you have as an individual, and civil rights are something that a group has that I don't, as individual, necessarily have civil rights. That's something that a group gains or is taken away from a group, and a civil liberty is something that I have as an individual. And so I think that was why that decision was made. And again, it mirrors something that happens in a lot of the American government books too, that those are treated as something different. And when you go through it, it also, there's only so much that students can do in one chapter. There's only so much information that we can ask students to read in one chapter. And I think that there was a decision that in order to have enough coverage of each of those topics, they needed to be split out into different chapters so that there could be enough information. We were given a certain number of pages. Each chapter needs to be about X number of words. And at that point, you got to stop. And so in order to be able to give sufficient coverage, they needed to be split up as well.
Thank you for diving a bit into your editorial process and writing process and why you decided to make civil liberties and civil rights 2 distinct chapters. And if any other audience members have questions during the webinar, please feel free to answer them in the chat, and we're able to get to them throughout the webinar and at the end. So don't be afraid to submit questions or any comments that you have. Our next question for you, Dr. Bzostek Walker, is what are the features that make Introduction to Political Science such a unique book?
So there are some things in the book that appear in, that are fairly common and consistent in most political science books at this point in time. The things like, how can I engage, encourage you to say, write letters to your member of Congress and things like that. But there are a couple of things that stand out. One are these features called What Can I Do? And I wrote these for almost every chapter. And what we're trying to do here is to let students know that the skills or the ideas that they're learning or that they're practicing when they study political science apply outside of the world of political science. Because one of the things that my students always told me was, well, this doesn't really help. I'm not going to be a political science major, so why is this important? And getting them to realize that when they're learning how to read public opinion data, or when they're learning how to read a chart about, this one's from party support in New Zealand, when they're learning how to read data about election returns, that actually will help them in whatever field they go into. Because in today's world of big data, regardless of what field you go into in life, in employment in general, most employers would be happy to have somebody who understands how to read graphs, how to manipulate data in a good way, not like the bad manipulation of data. But, being able to understand data, being able to understand why consumers prefer, Coke over Pepsi, whatever it is, those are skills that will only benefit them going forward. And one of the things that the 2 other senior contributing authors and I felt very strongly about was we wanted students to walk away from this class understanding that the skills you learn in political science help you regardless of what you do with your life. And so we've kind of called out the importance of critical thinking, the importance of communication, the importance of personal responsibility, quantitative skills, as they appear throughout the course. And then on the next slide, there's one about, pulled out one about critical thinking. And then there's also in some of the chapters, ways that the information that you learn in political science also connects to other courses. This was something really important to one of the other senior contributing authors, that oftentimes people make their way through an undergraduate degree and never really think about how what they're taking in one class connects to another class. That's at the core of liberal education. The whole idea that what you learn in one class really does connect with another class, and we wanted to kind of draw students' attention to that as they're working their way through the book.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think that Introduction to Political Science has a variety of unique features that, as you mentioned, encourage critical thinking skills, allow for the development of qualitative and quantitative data analysis skills, and allow students to see how political science topics are central to their lives, and how the topics that they're learning in this course aren't just limited to this course. They're also related to other courses that they take and other components of their everyday lives. Anthony, we have a question in the chat that I think you could answer. So, do we have hard copies that instructors can request for review?
So part of what allows us to be relatively sustainable and keep doing what we're doing is that we are not usually able to give out free hard copies of the book in order for review. It's just they're quite expensive to do, and every dollar we spend on that means we can't spend on developing new books and things like that. And since we don't end up getting quote unquote a sale, as a typical publisher does, there's a challenge there. However, if it's really urgent or you need it, we might be able to work something out. We might be able to find one that we have available, or a pre-proof copy or something like that. We don't have, it's not like we have a office library with a bunch of them readily available. But we also don't want them to become that to become a barrier between adopting and saving. So if you have a request for that, what we'd ask you to do is, you could connect with us, or through our customer support team, or me personally, and we can try to get you that, or find a way to get it over to you. If that's possible.
Thank you, Anthony. And OpenStax's textbooks, as we mentioned before, are available for free online through our website. They're available for free in PDF format and also for free in WebView format. And later on in the webinar, we'll talk a bit more about how you can access Introduction to Political Science for free. So that's another way that instructors are able to see our textbook and explore it a bit more. Awesome. So our next question for Dr. Bzostek Walker is, who should use Introduction to Political Science in their classroom?
It's an interesting question. So in Texas, for example, where I am, we do have a class called Intro to Political Science. And so that is definitely one class where this book could be of use. But I think that the chapters from it could be used to supplement, any lower division political science course. And it could be that whatever course you're teaching in political science, you may not necessarily like the coverage that the book you're using offers for, say, civil liberties or civil rights, or you may have an American government class that doesn't necessarily have a chapter about, say, international relations, and you're talking about foreign policy, which always comes at the very end of the class. And your students may not necessarily understand, and my background is in foreign policy, in international relations. And you may want your students to have more of just some background about, well, why is Joe Biden, spending all this time dealing with world leaders this week, right? Like there's stuff going on here. Why isn't he spending more time in the United States right now trying to, I don't know, lower gas prices or deal with inflation? Why is he like meeting with the president of China? And I've had students ask me that all the time. Why do we spend so much money on foreign aid? Like, why does all of that matter? You could use this textbook to just pull out chapters for things like international political economy or international relations and add them to your Canvas class or Blackboard or Moodle or whatever it ends up being, just as supplementary information for your students in an American government class, for them to be able to read about topics that your textbook doesn't necessarily cover in enough depth, or in any depth for that case. And so that's one of the great things about OER is the information is there for you. And we spent a lot of time, going through and finding pictures that were hopefully interesting, but are totally open license, and you can use them and post them and do whatever you'd like with them. Everything in the book can be used. There's also a way on the website where you can, even if the chapters are too long and you think your students won't read the whole thing, you can take out sections from the chapters and remove them and create a condensed version of the chapters for your students to read. And so it's really designed as an overview of the field of political science. And so anybody who's looking for just an overview of the field, the book hopefully will be useful for them.
Oh, thank you for clarifying. And one of our audience members asked, would you categorize this textbook or course as part of an undergraduate degree basics? So essentially, if it is suitable for students starting their basics or taking an introductory political science course or a general ed political science course.
Absolutely. I mean, that's who this book is written for. So, it is 100% written as a lower division, introductory course. I teach at a 2-year institution. This course is part of our curriculum, and it is written for that lower division student. It's also written. Well, the three of us who were the senior contributing authors, our conceptualization of the book was kind of like a welcome mat to the field of political science, if you will, right? Like, this is please join us in the world of political science. We know some of you will. We also know some of you won't. And if this is all you ever know about political science, hopefully this is going to be a good introduction. Hopefully you will learn to love political science like we do. But if you don't, hopefully you won't hate political science. And hopefully this will give you a lot of good information about political science. But this is not the 4,000 level or the senior level political science book. This is the nothing. You open the book on day one and you know nothing about political science. This is going to be hopefully should get you the basics. And some of the feedback that we got during the review process was that some of it was too advanced. And we went through multiple rounds of peer review from people in the field. And some of it was, this is not, you need to start further back, right? You need to give the students, it needs to be more basic. It needs to be, you need to start with more of the introductory things. You can't assume that they know anything. And so that's where this book starts.
Oh, perfect. Thank you so much for answering our audience members' question. And for any other audience members, if you have any other questions, please feel free to send them in the chat. I also noticed a question earlier about support materials, and we will get to that in just a few slides. So our second to last question is, why an OER political science textbook? Why is it why is it important for there to be a free, peer-reviewed, openly licensed political science textbook on the market?
So currently, there are not very many intro to political science textbooks. I was supposed to teach this course a couple years ago, and there were, I think, like 3 intro to political science books. So I tried to get all of them to figure out which one I was going to use. So I think there were like 3 available. One was like 800 pages, which is too much. One was like really short and extraordinarily expensive. I mean, it was like $90 or something for not a very big book, and it was not very good. And there's just not, our thought was there's a huge hole in what's available for students, and especially students who don't even necessarily know if they want to go into political science, who don't know if this is something that they're interested in, or who are maybe just looking for a distribution credit in political science. I mean, Texas is unique that Texas requires all students getting a degree from a public institution to take both American government and Texas government. So we get a lot of political science classes that way, but a lot of states don't. A lot of states just require you to take something in that social science field. So some people are like, oh, well, intro to political science sounds interesting. Why make people pay a whole lot of money for a book that may not be very good in a field that they may not be interested in? So it seemed like there was kind of a ripeness, if you will, for this type of book. And the books that were out there were not great. In terms of the question that's in there with California, with the core for U.S. and IR and comparative and political theory, I would say that in California, and I taught it at Cal State Bakersfield for 4 years before I moved to Texas. I would think that this would be before that, and I don't know that California has. I'm trying to remember, we didn't have a straight up intro to political science class when I was in California, but pieces of this book could be used in various classes, and so it could be used to supplement some political theory. It could be used to supplement some of the IR, and it could be used to supplement parts of the U.S. government. But I don't know that it would. I don't know that it would be used past that. I think it would be used in conjunction with those classes, if that makes sense, Josh. But California also, California, I know that they run their own, I know that a lot of the textbook companies run their own California editions of American Government, because California was requiring, at least when I was there, requiring that you add a California government component in American Government. And at least in my department, I was the only person who was really doing that sometimes. So there's a California component to American Government required too. So California is has some unique elements there. So California ends up having some unique things that drives some textbooks. Texas does unique things that drives textbooks. California does some unique things that drives textbooks. So this I think would be in conjunction, not post.
No, thank you for elaborating, Dr. Bzostek Walker, and thank you, Josh, for such a thoughtful question. We really appreciate all of our audience members submitting questions that we can get to today. And our last pre-written question for Dr. Bzostek Walker is, as we discussed, you are one of Introduction to Political Science's senior contributing authors. What was your writing process like? What were some core concepts, themes, ideas, or values that you really focused on when you were writing this text?
So as I said earlier, I had a job shift kind of in the middle of all this. I was slated to write the international relations chapter, and I was able to write the outline for that chapter, and then had to passed that off to somebody else to actually write it because I ended up not being able to complete it. And at least when I was putting together the outline for the international relations chapter, what I wanted out of that process was I wanted students who maybe didn't necessarily want to go into political science or go into international relations to be able to get a good overview of a snapshot of what international relations is. And so after reading that chapter, would they be able to understand the field of IR and be able to understand the primary concepts of IR from that limited snapshot? And I think that's the general overview, the general idea with the whole book, right? Because you're being asked to capture an entire field in one book. And I know a lot of us who are looking at this, I mean, we teach full 16-week, for those of us on a 16-week semester, you can teach a full 16-week class on basically each one of those chapters. And so you're trying to encapsulate a full 16-week class in the equivalent of like 30 pages, which is really daunting. And so how do you get 16 weeks worth of material into 30 pages of text? And you really have to boil it down to you have to separate what's important from what's interesting. And you still have to keep some of the interesting, but really focus on what are the absolute most important elements for students to know. And then I wanted to make sure we kept the how do you link the elements that students learn studying political science with how do those translate into what we're calling soft skills, the communication, critical thinking, empirical and quantitative reasoning, things like that, so that students, when they go to a job interview and somebody asks them, well, what have you learned? And they don't sit there and say, I don't know. They can say, oh, I have learned how to engage in quantitative reasoning, or I've learned how this connects to that, things like that. And I feel very strongly that our students end up much better prepared through political science than they realize. And so I just wanted to kind of have that pointed out to them.
No, thank you. It was really interesting hearing about your writing process. And I know I've always wondered how authors were able to condense so much material into these smaller, easier to digest introductory chapters. So it's very interesting to hear about your process behind that and how you determined which information to include in balancing core fundamental material versus things that are interesting but maybe not as core to the course or what students should be learning in their introductory course. Anthony, we have a question in the chat for you. So this audience member, Elena, I would like to ask about the English language level of the textbook. Would international students, non-native speakers, who only start their political science studies in English manage to read the text?
We haven't done, unless Rachel, you happen to have, we haven't done a specific reading level analysis. We can do that. Most of our textbooks are written at the, in terms of reading level specifically, I think they fall into the high school level, second or third year. That's sort of where they often fall. So that's where they end up being. I think that's what, in terms of reading level specifically, most colleges are sort of aiming for. So I think that it certainly could be a challenge for a student who has less experience with English, less ability, less facility with it. We actually are working on translations of certain of our textbooks. We're not there on this one yet. We could do a deeper analysis. One thing I'll say, and I know this is not something, accessibility is important in all aspects, and what we don't want to do is make it a large challenge. We don't want to say, oh, it's accessible if you do this, 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 and this. However, the fact that we have the books in several online formats and doc formats means that they can more easily be navigated by translation tools and so on if that's desirable. And what we're looking into doing better on that front. But that's probably where it lands. If you'd like, we could do that analysis using a couple of the tools that are available, and then come back to see where this gets. I would also say, I bet, the book does have things. It has a glossary. It has those types of items where some of the reserved words, complex words, and so on are defined. Of course, you're probably also asking about the overall reading as well.
Thank you, Anthony, for answering our audience members' question. I think that actually provides a really good transition into what we will be talking about next, which is how can instructors access our textbook and its free instructor resources and student resources, and make sure that their students access them as well. So I am going to go ahead and share my screen. If anyone has any questions, I'll get to them at the end of this slide. Anthony, are you able to see the OpenStax's homepage? Perfect. Okay, so the way that instructors or students or anyone can access our free political science textbook. So first you're going to go to openstax.org, and then under subjects, you can either click on all or social sciences. I'll just click on social sciences. And as you can see all of our social sciences textbooks here, including Introduction to Political Science. So I'm going to click on that. And now we are on the book details page. As you can see, there are 3 tabs: book details, instructor resources, and student resources. On the book details page, you see a summary of our text, the names of our senior contributing authors, and information about our errata process. So if you're using the textbook and you come across something that you notice that you think warrants a correction, you can submit your correction through here. And every errata suggestion that we receive goes through our editorial team. And you can actually see the full list of errata suggestions and their decisions. So as you can see, we have some in review, and we have one that's actually going to be corrected when we publish an updated version of this textbook. You can see some other information like the publication date. Over here, this is the most important part of the book details page, is the get the book information. So over here, you can click on the table of contents. And when you click on the table of contents, you're actually able to click on a hyperlink to a specific section. So let's say you're looking for Section 5.2, what limits voter participation in the United States. You can actually just click on it, and in another tab, it will bring you directly to that section. You can also click View Online, and when you click View Online, it will actually bring you to the online version of our textbook. And as you can see over here, you're able to click on overall parts of the book and then see the chapters within those components of the book, and then the specific sections within. You're also able to access our textbook by downloading a PDF, or if you would like a print copy, this is where you would click to order a print copy. So if you want to order a print copy, just click order a print copy, click order a personal copy, and it will bring you to Amazon where you can purchase that. But of course, you can download a free PDF of our textbook, and you can just click download a PDF, click go to PDF, and then in this separate tab right here, you will see a PDF version of our textbook. And PDF versions are particularly important to us because we know that a lot of students lack reliable internet access. So students who lack access to consistent internet can, when they do have internet at the beginning of the semester, download the PDF version of this textbook once, and then throughout the rest of the semester, they're able to access the PDF version even without internet access since they've already downloaded it. Now that we have talked about the book details page, I want to show you a bit more about what the inside of the book looks like. So let's just go to section 2.1. So as you can see, this is what the inside of our online textbook looks like. You are able to adjust the font size, which is really great for accessibility purposes. And you can also search for the book for specific terms. So let's say I want to look at civil rights, I can search for that. And actually, it'll bring me directly to a component of the textbook that highlights that. So as I'm scrolling through this section 2.1, as you can see, the beginning of the section highlights learning outcomes. And as you scroll through, there are hyperlinks to other parts of the book, as well as hyperlinks to external websites. There are plentiful examples throughout the text. Keywords are bolded, which is really great. And actually, you're actually able to take notes and highlight certain concepts throughout the text. And students are able to do this when they're logged into their student account, which is free and easy to create. So let's say that a student knows that utilitarianism is going to be on their exam. So they can make a note, highlight it in blue, say exam question, and they can actually save that. And then if they want to view all of their highlights and notes, they can click on highlights, see the sections of the text that they actually highlighted and the notes that they made. And they can actually print it, which is kind of like a study guide that students can easily create and formulate directly from the textbook itself. But as you can see, our textbook has plentiful examples. And as we mentioned, we sought to make this text interactive and engaging for students. So it's not just giant blocks of text. We also include a variety of different videos, so links to external videos that students can actually just watch directly in the text. And then, as Dr. Bzostek Walker mentioned earlier, there are a variety of different engagement resources and tools throughout the textbook. So for example, this one right here is an example of our Connecting Courses feature, which highlights how whatever the student is learning about in this section is related to other things that they'll learn about in other classes or other classes that they'll take. And speaking of these engaging features, if you go to the preface of our textbook, you can actually find information about these key features. So there are 6 key features that we include in our textbook. So the changing political landscape, which highlights how changing demographics are affecting politics and political science. Where can I engage and what can I do, which highlight how students can become civically engaged and how the skills that they're building and topics that they're learning about through this political science textbook can assist them in finding a job or are beneficial in finding a job or beyond just political science. As Dr. Bzostek Walker mentioned, we have Show Me the Data, which provides graphics and that allows students to build their data analysis and interpretation skills. We have Connecting Courses, which we just showed, that highlights how certain chapter concepts are related to other courses. And lastly, we have Meet a Professional, which provides little interviews or snippets of information about a variety of different professionals working in fields related to politics and political science. Something else that I want to point out is that, like other textbooks, each section includes, at the end of each section, there is a summary that just summarizes each section. There are the key terms listed out. There are review questions, which are a really helpful tool for students to evaluate their knowledge. And then we actually include suggested readings in case you're interested in providing optional readings to students or in case students are interested in learning more about specific topics. Now that we have dove into the book details section, I want to dive into the instructor resources section. So OpenStax's, as I mentioned at the beginning of this webinar, offers an array of free instructor resources to go alongside each of our textbooks. And in order to access these instructor resources, you do need to create an instructor account. It takes a minute to create. It's free. It's easy. After this, I'll send the link in the chat. But essentially, we require instructors to create an instructor account to access our resources to maintain the academic integrity of these materials. Each time an instructor requests to create an instructor account, our customer service team physically determines whether or not that is actually an instructor submitting that request and then is able to subsequently grant access. So I want to dive into the instructor resources that come alongside Introduction to Political Science. So we have the link to the OER Commons Hub. And the OER Commons Hub is a site where instructors can ask other instructors questions about OpenStax's Introduction to Political Science, and where they can also share resources that they've created for their political science courses and actually find resources created by other political science instructors and instructors using this text. We have our Instructor Getting Started guide, which is a really helpful resource in just highlighting what OpenStax's entails, how you can access the book, and how you can access our instructor-only resources. Introduction to Political Science also comes with a 400-plus question test bank, which includes multiple choice, short answer, and essay questions. And as we mentioned earlier, our instructor accounts are each manually verified by our customer support team. And it's because, for example, for our test bank, we know that some of these questions may be used by instructors for exams, and we don't want these questions getting into the hands of non-instructors. So we make sure that our test bank is only available through a verified instructor account, and you can thereby use these questions in exams or on homework assignments. We also offer lecture slides to go alongside each chapter, and these lecture slides include key graphics, key concepts, definitions, and examples. So I can actually show you an example of one of these PowerPoints. One moment. So up here on my screen, I have just downloaded the chapter lecture slides for Chapter 10, Executives, Cabinets, and Bureaucracies. And as you can see here, the chapter includes, or the PowerPoint slides include a chapter outline. They highlight examples. They include tables, and they also include graphics. They highlight learning outcomes. They have a variety of figures and important bullet points, and as I mentioned, graphics. And this can just be a really valuable resource for instructors that they can use to supplement the text and save themselves time so they don't have to spend extra time creating lecture slides to go with the book. They're here. And because our resources are free and openly licensed, you can make any changes that you want to these slides. You can add other examples, add slides from other PowerPoints, delete slides, add other graphics, do what you need to meet your classroom needs. Now I am back on the instructor resources page, and I want to highlight the last few resources. So we have our instructor's manual, which is a comprehensive manual that provides some guidance on delivering OpenStax's content in the most interesting and dynamic way for your students. We also include our diversity and representation development guidelines. DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion are very central to OpenStax's mission, and we want to ensure that our materials are reflective of diverse audiences and that students see themselves in the materials that we produce. So instructors are able to actually learn a bit more about our diversity and representation development guidelines and how we incorporate diversity and representation into the materials and books that we create. Lastly, we actually discussed this resource a bit earlier, but we actually offer a book customization resource. So we have created docx files for each section of this textbook, which you can download and then revise and edit. So let's say that you want to share chapter 10 with your students, right? But you don't want to include, I believe there's 7 sections in that textbook, and you don't want to include all 7 sections. You just want to include sections 1 and 2. You can download those, upload them to your LMS, and just have students read those sections. But let's say you want to add information to one of the sections that we have, you're also able to do that as well. Because when you download these files, they're in docx format, and you're able to make the changes that you need. Lastly, I wanted to highlight our student resources. So we offer a few resources for students. So students must create their student account to highlight and take notes within the text, and their student account is free and easy to use. But we also offer these additional student resources. We know that student success is more than just having access to a free textbook. We also want to ensure that students are making the most of OpenStax's materials. So we include a Getting Started guide, which provides some guidance for using OpenStax's books. And we also include a reading and note-taking guide and a student time management guide in order to help students take effective notes while reading the textbook, and in order to help students beyond just making this textbook accessible to them. We want to make sure that they have the full array of tools that they need to succeed in school, and effective reading and studying and time management skills are essential for student success. All right, I see that we have one question in the chat. If anyone has any other questions, please feel free to ask as well. But this one question, what is an example of reviewers' feedback on materials being too advanced for first and second year students? I ask because sometimes our conscious and unconscious biases can enter into the writing space and maybe limit information to first and second year, especially disproportionately impacted communities.
So the way that the review process worked was the chapters went out to multiple people for peer review. It was a very rigorous peer review process. And I don't remember which chapter it was, but it was a chapter that was extraordinarily long. I think that the chapter was probably 3 times the length that it needed to be. And I think that the overall comment by some of the peer reviewers was that the information in the chapter was at a level that one would expect to see in a graduate level textbook, and not necessarily in an undergraduate level textbook. And I think that it's really hard to strike a good balance in an introductory book where you want to push the students, and you want to challenge the students, and you want to let the students grow and explore and learn. But you also don't want to write at a level where students who may be struggling, students who may be, college is a challenge for them. You don't want it to be so hard and so difficult for them that they put the book down and they walk away. So it's hard, and so you have to find that balance, and it's a fine line. But you definitely don't want it written at a level, and you don't want it presented in a way that one would expect to find in a graduate level textbook. And there was some information there that was just, it was so dense, I will say. And there was so much in a couple of chapters that you would never get to in an undergraduate course that covered the entire field.
Thank you so much.
I so appreciate that. And I'll just say, like, in general, so one thing we try to do is have a really diverse, representation of different types of schools, institutions, geographies, people from different populations reviewing the textbook. So we are trying to get as broad a base as possible. But I'll also say, I think across our book, this book and others, the most difficult feedback we get is oriented around level and scope, and especially you get into specialized topics, and it's an instructor's core topic. They know it well. Either they wrote it or they reviewed it, and they want to see more or less. And then more generalist feedback on things. So it is really hard to balance, and I appreciate having an author talk about that aspect and the challenge of it there. It is, and if you look through all of our errata across all our books, many of them that are submitted as errors are actually level issues. And doesn't mean they're not valid, and they can rise to the level of errors if you're not including something we should include or not. But it is a common and important, because it's because it means so much, a topic to get into. But it is one we struggle with a lot across all the books.
Sorry, Anthony, can you hear me?
Now I can.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. I just wanted to thank Dr. Bzostek Walker for hopping on this webinar today, and for all of your contributions to Introduction to Political Science by OpenStax's, and for answering all of our questions so thoughtfully and thoroughly. Thank you, Anthony, for hopping on as well and answering our audience questions and highlighting why we decided to publish a free political science textbook. And thank you to our audience members for such thoughtful questions and for engaging with us today and taking time out of your busy schedules to attend this webinar. We will be sending out the recording afterwards, and if you have any follow-up questions, please feel free to email our customer support team at info@openstax.org, or contact us through social media, whatever the platform works best for you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Lindsay. Appreciate it.
No, thank you, everyone. Have a great day.